When we try to understand meaning, it is not only important to understand what the speaker says, but also what they do with what they say. Take this guy. He has a wish. He wants an axolotl. The genie is a nice genie, and he grants him the wish. Just like that, the guy has an axolotl. Now, an alien observer might wonder, how do these humans get to make something happen just by saying it? How did the genie make the axolotl appear by simply asserting that there is one? It would indeed be a cool superpower to have. But in fact, things are not quite like that. Humans can't make things appear by simply saying that they do. That's simply wishful thinking. Genies that make things appear live only in our imagination. But our world does not quite work like that, nor does our language. Except, wait a minute, even in our world, there are things that we humans can make happen by simply saying things. Humans can, in fact, do things with words. Well, suppose there is a thief stealing a painting, and he gets caught and put on trial. Now is where we can actually do things with our words. See what happens? In court, the judge sentences the thief to 10 years of prison. And so he goes to prison for 10 years. So you see, the words of the judge make it so. Her words made it happen. The judge performs an action simply by uttering the right words. It's a performative speech act. So sometimes humans can make things happen with their words, but that doesn't mean that they can make everything happen with their words. First, our judge has to say the right words. The content of her utterance has to convey the sentencing to prison. So, it is important what she says, her locution. Next, it's also important who says it. If the alien observer would say it, the thief would not be sentenced to prison. The alien would first have to become a judge. You see, these performative speech acts work because we humans have socially accepted agreements about them. And in this case, the social agreement relates to our justice system. So, therefore, it's also important where the utterance is performed. If the same woman, even if she is a judge, is having coffee at a bar with the accused, and if she finds out about his crime, nothing will happen, even if she says the same words. He might just feel guilty, but not go to prison. So you see, you can make things happen with words, pretty profound things like sending someone to prison. And you don't have to be a judge to act with words. Check this out. The guy with the megaphone promises the poor guy with the heavy load to help him. So not only did he tell the poor guy something, he also committed to do something. He made a promise. And he explicitly introduced it as a promise, which makes it a performative. He can even add hereby, which specifically marks the act of doing something with your words. Now, whether he will keep his promise is another question altogether, one that has nothing to do with his language, but with his credibility and his ethics. The fact that he's just saying it might give us a clue that he's not sincere, but we can't really know his real intentions. We can only go by what he said. but it does look like he was insincere. So, for a successful speech act, you have to really be sincere. Now, take this guy. What does he do with his words? He doesn't actually say, I promise. He just uses a regular assertion. But by his actions, you can tell that he's really about to help the poor guy. It looks like he's making a promise and that he will keep it. His intentions are pure. He is sincere. But does he make a promise, even if he doesn't explicitly say so? How can you promise with a simple sentence? Because not every sentence is a promise. If he would simply say, he should not have tried to live this on his own, there's not even the hint of a promise. So, what is the difference? What makes a simple assertion into a promise? And what is the difference between these three guys? Well, obviously, the locution is different. The three guys are saying very different things. One guy makes an explicit promise, but somehow we don't quite believe him. His actions don't seem to be sincere. This guy is not saying that he's promising anything, nor is he acting as if he would. There's no promise here at all. And this guy does not say that he's promising, but his actions look very promising. He seems to be making an actual promise. So, what we can conclude is that what is said is not always enough to make a sincere speech act. What is important is also what the speaker means, the elocution of the speech act. And this has a lot to do with their intentions, which of course we don't always know. So, to understand the meaning of a sentence, we not only have to understand what is said, the locution, we also have to understand what the speaker intends to say, the elocution, also known as the elocutionary force or simply the force. Now, as we have seen, in some utterances, the force is not directly encoded in what is literally said, but arguably every sentence we utter also has a force. With everything we say, we also do something. And while it might be obvious to the speaker what they mean with their utterance, it's not always obvious to the person they're talking to. That's because the relation between what we say and what we do with it, between content and force, is not always straightforward. Take a simple utterance. The genie might tell our alien observer that the guy with the axolotl is playing with it. His sole intention here is to provide information, and this is typically the purpose of a regular declarative clause. The fact that the clause is declarative is encoded in its grammatical form. It's the kind of sentence that in English has subject, verb, object order, that ends in falling intonation, or is marked with a period, and which has a truth value. Such sentences are typically, maybe by default, associated with the force of an assertion. The speaker is committed to the truth of the proposition and wishes to inform their addressee of what they believe. Now, there's other clause types that are associated with their own typical force. Take, for example, questions. Here, the genie can ask the alien if they ever played with an axolotl. And their intention in uttering this sentence is simple. They want to know and they think that their hearer will be able and willing to provide an answer. Again, the fact that the clause is an interrogative is, in English, encoded in its grammatical form. It's the kind of sentence that, in English, has the auxiliary verb at the beginning of the sentence, and which often comes with rising intonation and a question mark at the end of the sentence. Such sentences are typically may be by default associated with the force of a question or a request. The speaker wants to know something and requests an answer from their addressee. And there is a third type of clause, which is by default associated with a particular force. Now the speaker wants something to happen. He wants help. As before, the fact that the clause is an imperative is, in English, encoded in its grammatical form. It's the kind of sentence that, in English, has the verb at the beginning of the sentence and the subject is missing. It is understood as referring to the hearer. And it is often marked with an exclamation mark at the end of the sentence. These imperative sentences are almost always associated with the force of a command or request. So now we have seen that there are cases where the illocutionary force of an utterance seems to be encoded in the grammatical form of the utterance. Declaratives are assertions, interrogatives are questions, and imperatives are commands. Though, if you think about the kinds of utterance that you hear in your daily conversations, you will notice very soon that things are not always that simple. Take that poor guy again. What he says here sounds like a question, but he's not simply asking for information, because he would not be satisfied with simply an answer. If it really were a question, then an answer should be enough. So what he really is doing is requesting help. So the clause type alone is not enough to tell you the force of an utterance. Speakers use more information than just the clause type to relate utterances to their illocutionary force. Oh, and there is one more thing about speech acts. Understanding speech acts is about understanding the use of an utterance. And when utterances are used, they are most often used in interaction. Suppose no one is there, not even a mirror. Suppose you are in the forest. When you utter an interrogative, whom are you asking? Why would you ask? So, are you still asking a question? When you utter an imperative, are you still giving a command, even if no one is listening? It looks like an utterance might only be a real speech act if it has an effect on someone. So utterances have content, the locution, and they can have force, their illocution, which depends on the intention of the speaker and the context. But they are only complete speech acts if they have an effect on the listener. That's their perlocution.